Okay, we're going to get started. So thanks everyone for joining our session today. We're kicking off Undergraduate Careers Exploration Week with our first panel on the careers in pharmaceuticals. So thank you so much to our panelists who are able to join us, and thank you also to our participants who are here. If you are able to, please turn on your cameras. This is a networking session, so I'm sure the panelists would love to put your face to your names and interact with you. It's just easier and nicer to interact with actual people as opposed to your names on the screen. And again, as I said before, the session will be recorded, so just a disclaimer there. So for those of you that I haven't met before, I'm Jennifer Thesneem, and I'm a career advisor here in the School of Chemical Sciences Career Services Office. And today my role for this session is to just facilitate our conversation. This is a chance for you all to ask questions to our panelists. Anything you want to know about working in the pharmaceutical industry, getting to know about different career paths and career options within the industry. So any questions at all, please think of those right now so that you can ask when you have the chance. So we have two amazing panelists who are joining us, Justin and Andrea, who are from Abbot and AbbVie, two big pharmaceutical companies. The other thing I just wanted to put as a side note for housekeeping notes, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or if you want to, you can also use the raise hand option in the reactions button in the bottom and ask that way. Or if you're uncomfortable asking directly, you can also DM me your question, and I'm more than happy to ask it to our panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists who are here today. Alumni, if you can just start off by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about yourself, talking about your major when you were here at Illinois, and then currently where you are at, and a little bit about your current position. So Justin, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Justin Grigus. I am actually a recent graduate of U of I. I graduated this past spring of 2020 with a degree in chemical engineering. I am from the Chicagoland area, so Park Ridge, Illinois. I'm right by Rosemont, Des Plaines. I currently work for Abbott Laboratories. So I've been interning with them for about 3 years, then transitioned to full time, where I'm part of the professional development program. So it's 3 years, 3 different jobs, basically on the pre-management track. Get to see all the different sites that we have. And then obviously my 3rd year is going to be an international role as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah, just a little bit more is that, yeah, I've always wanted to be in the pharmaceutical industry. I've just been kind of drawn to it. So I really jumped at the chance to be with Abbott. And we're just a giant company, as Jennifer said, and that we have a bunch of different opportunities that span not just in pharma, but also in medical devices, nutrition, you name it.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Andrea.
Yeah, hello. So my name is Andrea Delgado, but you can call me Andy. I also graduated spring 2020. Roller coaster of, it's already been 3 years since I graduated, so that's kind of crazy. I work at AbbVie, so very close to Abbott. They were a parent company and then we separated. AbbVie concentrates, we're a biopharmaceutical company. We've acquired a lot of other pharmaceutical companies since parting ways from Abbott. Some of our medication that you might be familiar with, or medical devices, are Humira, Lupron, Rinvoq, which is just pharmaceutical. Pfizer released a new medication for COVID called Paxlovid. We're also involved in that. Yeah, I graduated with a degree in chemistry and a minor in environmental studies. And I think I just told you about my employer, and my day-to-day looks like I'm in the quality department. So I get to review complaints, post-quality assurance department. So I get to review complaints regarding this medication, coordinating investigations. I can delve much farther, but since this is my intro, I will stop it at that.
Awesome. Thank you, Angie. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more about your experience working at each of your roles. Participants, do you have any burning questions that you want to ask our panelists? If not, I can start off by asking the first one. So can you tell us a little bit more about your transition into working in industry? How do you think your how do you think your undergrad has sort of prepared you for your current roles? And talk to us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, I can start if you want. So obviously for me, I had quite a bit of internship experience with Abbott. So actually at the Research Park site, which is just south of campus, I got my start with Abbott, and basically I think spring of my junior year. And that really allowed me to work part-time when I was in school. So probably one of the best choices ever made was doing that, because it really kind of had me learning to balance school and then also working at the same time. And I got 2.5 years of pretty much nonstop work experience from that prior to when I actually transitioned to full-time work. So I feel like for me, answering emails, holding meetings, running meetings with different sorts of stakeholders, it was all very relevant to stuff that I'd been doing for quite a long time. On top of classes, so it was almost when classes were done, I was working a couple more hours per week, but it was, I would say, a very easy transition. As far as classes, I think really the most important thing is classes. They're going to teach you a lot about the different fundamentals. I'm not doing straight chemical engineering right now with my role. I'm more in the project engineering and the facility side, but it's more or less the fundamentals. I would say the most important thing when you're thinking about getting into your full-time role is not stress in a lot of the details. It's about getting really that strong foundation, and then it's really being, I guess, learned how to pick up things fast is really the most important thing. So if you're just concentrate on learning the skills, and obviously the details are important, but it's not going to be the exact same as undergrad. So I would say a lot of the focus is just kind of preparing yourself to be open to learning, and then just trying to pick up new skills as fast as you can. But if you can get any sort of internship experience, I would highly recommend doing that. If you can get any sorts of part-time jobs when at school to start learning how to transition back into that full-time life, it is a lot easier.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Justin. I think once you're in the industry, you get to find that while you may be very well versed in, for some of you, you might be chemical engineers or spec chem. You may know a lot about chemistry and what you studied, but really once you get into your role, it's when you really start putting everything that you've done so far in your school career, putting it together, and then using those tools to learn more in the job. I think no school will prepare you for the specific role that you're going to be doing, but it is important to form a cohesive understanding of everything, and then adapt and be flexible according to whatever your role is. So I think that's a really important thing that Justin mentioned. For me, it wasn't as straightforward going into pharmaceuticals. While I was in school, I just sort of did chemistry because it was really interesting to me, and I thought it was really cool, but I never really thought that I would go into pharmaceuticals. I wanted to transition more into the environmental aspect of chemistry. And so to me, I'm here in my job, which I love, and I love my company. But for me, it wasn't like a one-way ticket. I had to figure it out. So when I was in school, I agree with Justin. I think interning, whatever that job is, it's fine. You don't need to be in like a pharmaceutical company. You can just be in like a general chemistry, like a general lab. But I do think that interning is important. I interned at a food company while I was in school. I worked at the lab. I got to see how I could implement what I already knew from classes, from my lab specifically, since most of my jobs so far have been within a lab setting, how I could use those tools that I already knew and those concepts that I had already learned into my everyday settings, which I thought would help me a lot. The classes that I specifically referred to while working in my lab experience, I found them especially helpful. I think learning how to write reports, I think that's such a important skill to have. I'm not a great writer. I'm not a writer at all. That's why I'm in science. But I think learning how to say what you need to say in a cohesive manner, so important. And I got a lot of that from writing reports, right? Which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Stayed up many nights just writing out things. So I feel you, but believe me, it does pay off into your career. So so I started interning at a food company, and then I just didn't really, spring hit, spring 2020, January hit, of course, we all went to quarantine, and I was just super lost. Like, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know like what I should be doing. So to me, it was really scary, and I just didn't know which way to go. One of the things that that helped me a lot was just setting up the basics, like LinkedIn. I'm sure you all have it by now, because you all look very ready and studious, and of course you're like in this meeting. So I'm sure that you are at a better point than I was when I was graduating. But LinkedIn, setting up like your profile, setting up like who you are as a person, like describing your experience, I think it's really key, because recruiters will start reaching out to you, which is what happened to me. So recruiters right now in the industry, having recruiters reach out to you for contract positions is very, very normal. In fact, the way that I got my job was by being a contractor first and then getting hired full time. At the first company that I worked at, which was Ingredient. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that company, but it's everything corn company. We manufactured pharmaceutical grade dextrose, like syrup, starch. We really got everything out of corn. But so I started as a contractor there. I got hired, and then I switched. I went into Abbot actually for a little bit, worked in the regulatory area. I speak Spanish, so I was part of the LATAM, so that's like Latin American countries, wing, and so that helped me out a lot. And then from there, once I had my foot into pharmaceutical companies, if you work with Abbott, then other companies are going to start reaching out to you, which is what happened to me. And so AbbVie reached out to me, and they were like, hey, would you see if you're interested in post-quality work? And I said yes. And I've been working with AbbVie for a year and a half. I think having a chemical, any science really, specifically chemistry, biology, really gives you the flexibility to go into any field that you want to explore. And I think what's key is that you can have the best grades possible, but if you don't know how to sell yourself or how to market yourself, then you're not gonna you're not going to get very far. But which is why I'm mentioning that you need to learn how to market yourself and sort of say, like, these are the skills that I currently have, and this is why you want me doing whatever job you're looking for. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. I'm sure you answered a lot of different questions. So yeah, in summary, I guess, as you both mentioned, really internships and having some sort of experience, whether in the industry or not, is super important. And also, as you mentioned, the importance of developing soft skills as well. Awesome. So we did have a question in the chat. What fascinated you about pharmaceuticals that inspired you to pursue it as a career?
Yeah, so I guess for me, it was more about, I guess, the impact of the pharmaceuticals, or in Abbott's case, just about the medical industry in general. To speak a little bit more about what we do. So Abbott, we're comprised of several different businesses. One of those is pharmaceuticals. So we make a lot of like your generic pharmaceuticals that are used in those what we call emerging markets. So it's like your third world countries that are kind of coming into the world stage. So it's a lot of those sorts of medicines like ibuprofen or Tylenol that they don't really have like a reliable medication out there. So it's kind of like when you go to Walmart and you can see a medicine on the shelf and you can, oh, I trust this one, it's made with quality. That's kind of what we do in those countries, because there's not a lot of reliable manufacturers out there. So it's just kind of being it's kind of being part of that sort of impact that you can, what I'm doing is having an impact on other people. Besides pharmaceuticals, we're in the nutrition business, so Pedialyte, Ensure, we do all that stuff that helps people. I know multiple people who's when they're in the hospital, that's what they're on, or if you're elderly, that's how they get their nutrition. So it's really having that real impact on saving somebody's life or helping their quality of life better. We also do different sorts of stuff like medical devices. So if you heard of Freestyle Libre, managing diabetes with now you're having to stick your finger every single day. It's huge. So it's really like a quality of life thing as well. I mean, we make heart stents, pacemakers. One of our newest branches, actually very exciting, is we have it's electrical stimulation for chronic pain. So we make stuff that works with your spinal cord that for people who have pain every single day of their life that they cannot do anything else with. It basically helps stimulate it so you don't get caught on narcotics. It's basically anything that you can think of that helps somebody's life. That's what kind of drew me to Abbott, and that's kind of what drew me to the pharmaceutical industry in general, is just having what I'm doing. So I'm doing stuff with facilities, so I'm helping make the buildings or helping to maintain the buildings and systems and infrastructure that helps our plants keep going. So I'm not the one who's directly making the products right now, but it's what I'm doing still has that impact, that it's touching all these people's lives. I mean, I think we have a goal to reach, I think it's 1 trillion people by 2030. So it's really a big lofty goal, but that's the amount of reach that you can have when you work in this sort of industry. It's not just making something as a convenience, it's really helping to improve somebody's life. So I would say that's the reason why I was really drawn to this industry.
Yeah, same. Piggyback writing off of Justin, I think the outreach that particularly Abbot and AbbVie have on a global scale is what drew me to pharmaceuticals. One of my core values is that I love helping people, as cheesy as that sounds. I think it's important identifying your passion. Something very simple for me, it's like I like helping people. I love helping people. So if I can incorporate that in my job and or in my profession, then I think that's what people recognize in you, like how passionate you are. So to me, it's very important to find that in whatever you're doing. And I was very lucky that AbbVie aligns their motto, literally, I think if you look up AbbVie and you see their goal, is impacting people's lives in a positive manner, which I think, we need in the world, compassion and all that good stuff. So that's what attracted me to pharmaceuticals. Again, it's that outreach and that care that my company specifically has for people, and then also for its employees. I think once you're in AbbVie, like Justin said, there's so many fields that you could go to, and really, like, the limits are, there are no limits. There's no boundaries. Whatever you want to do, whatever you're interested in, you can explore. So I think the flexibility of pharmaceuticals, whether you're like me, I'm in post quality assurance, whether you want to ensure quality in the product, or whether you want to be in the process of creating the product, like being a process engineer, or maintaining those infrastructures like Justin, or making them, or being in the research and development team. You can do anything. So I think possibilities and the ability of reaching out to people that you wouldn't reach out otherwise, I think that's what attracted me to pharmaceuticals. Long story short. Yeah, anytime.
So what other questions do we have from students?
I have a follow-up question on something that Andy said earlier about, like, knowing how to market yourself to these companies to, like, so that they're interested in you. So a question that I have for both of you is, was there anything that you think really set you apart from other candidates when it came to, like, securing an internship? And, like, what is that quality? And what's your biggest tip in general for like securing an internship or a position, like a permanent position in a company?
Yeah, just kind of jumping off of that. So for me, getting my internship, obviously, I didn't get my first internship at Research Park until halfway through my junior or my sophomore year. So for what I did after I finished my freshman year was I knew I had to get some sort of experience to do something, not just kind of go home, sit on the couch. And I wanted to kind of better myself, to put myself in the best position that I could be as a candidate moving forward. So I actually did undergraduate research for about 8 months in the chemistry lab. What I did was I just went through the list online. You can go on the chemistry and chemical engineering website, just found all the different teachers who were doing research. I think I sent out about 30 or 40 customized emails. You hear back from some, you don't hear back from some, you get some say we're ready full, but you just got to keep trying. And I was able to secure one of them. So I did that the summer after my freshman year, and just kind of having that experience. One, it made me realize I didn't want to be in a lab full time, but the experience that I did get there, it was able to kind of propel me into getting that internship, because it was able to have me touch on a lot of those skills. I was doing a lot of hands-on lab stuff, but it was related to pharmaceuticals. It was doing biosynthetic preparation of different sorts of small molecules. So it was really kind of learning those skills and being able to talk in an intelligent manner. I think out of just standard school stuff, it kind of expanded what I knew and how to be able to kind of communicate in that work-like setting. That kind of set me up for when I did talk to people at job fairs that next fall. I felt like I was prepared, and just being able to talk about something, even if it's not an internship, it's doing research, it's doing something that you have that unique experience that you can really draw from, that kind of helps you build on yourself as a candidate. So for me, I was able to kind of use all the right words, use those big fancy words that they probably didn't know what I was talking about, but I can speak intelligently. And then the biggest thing is also having stories that you can tell for your interviews. One of the hardest things is when you're just sitting in there in the interview and they ask you a question and your mind draws a blank, or you find yourself going in a circle referencing the same summer job in high school that you just can't think of something else. So it's just getting something to kind of better yourself or get more experiences in a way, even if it's a club, even if it's something else, you can kind of just know how to cycle through and draw from during your interviews, is really kind of a very valuable experience. Also, just kind of going off of that, jumping into the job fairs, I've done a little bit of recruiting, both actually when I was a student and currently, and I've kind of sat on the the other side or stood there at those job fairs. And one of the things that you need to remember is that they're seeing hundreds or not thousands of people go through their queue every single time that they go there. So make yourself stand out among the bunches. Don't just be the person that talks to you for 10 minutes and says everything about everything you've ever done and not give them a break. I think the most important thing is remember that it is a conversation and people like to talk about themselves, I found. So if you just ask them questions, they'll have a lot more positive feedback about the conversation itself. So I would say don't let that get lost. It's not trying to just throw all your resume out there and seeing what happens. It's a lot about more of that give and take and really building a positive connection. The job fair that I actually landed my first internship with Abbot is I talked with a recruiter. It somehow got to fishing or something. It was some random thing that was not related to being in chemistry or school or anything else. It was about kind of that connection. So we'll say even going forward when you're in that job work life, to build connections with people, that's one of the most important things you can go forward. So it's kind of a roundabout in-depth answer, but I will say any sort of experience that you can get being researched, being in clubs, just something that you can kind of draw from more experiences in, that's going to definitely add to your resume. But then also just remembering when you are in those interviews or you are doing those job fairs that you can really have more of the interpersonal communication that is probably going to set you apart more than somebody else.
Yeah, I think Justin mentioned everything that I would have wanted to touch on. But yeah, I cannot emphasize how important it is for you to ask questions, especially in an interview. One of the things actually, when I was interviewing for AbbVie, that they told me that they liked was that I asked them questions at the end. I asked them about what is one thing that they can be very simple questions, but what is one thing that you like about your job? That's a good question. And that's something, I don't know if that's what I asked, but I think it was related. That was the gist of the question. And they were like, whoa, like no one has ever asked me this question before. Like I think I asked, how did AbbVie impact your life or like your growth?
Oh boy, I think we lost Andrea there. Yeah, her connection was looking a little bit patchy, but I'm sure she'll jump on. But yeah, thanks Justin for that advice, and oh, there she is.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
No worries. Yeah, you were getting frozen a little bit, so Zoom may have kicked you out, but I'm glad you can join us again.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, no, but definitely asking questions is a great way to make yourself memorable, and questions that are specific to the company that you're applying to. It shows that not only have you done your research, but you also want to know more, right? You're like doing that extra step. Not only are you familiar with like, oh, okay, yeah, AbbVie is just a pharmaceutical company, like that's all I need to know, but you're related, you're wanting to see more before, like I think we often pose ourselves as give me a job, I want any job, like I'll take a job, right? But then you should also realize that you have just as much, they're interested in you just as much as you're interested in them. So I think you should ask the questions that you want to ask that are specific to the company that you're applying to, and again, go from there. Another thing that Justin mentioned was being in an interview, it's like having a conversation, and you don't want to be like all fact and no real substance, right? Because then again, like Justin said, interviewers are seeing many candidates, and they all have around the same experience that you might have, or even more experience, or even less experience, right? But what's important is, how is your experience uniquely to you? How can that experience be applied to the role that you're going for? How does that make you uniquely prepared for the job, and how can you apply all of the skills that you've learned from that experience, or what did you draw from that experience? I think those are often the points that I like to highlight. With that being said, a lot of prep work does go into it. I'm a very shy person, and so I often have to practice a lot the questions that they might ask me, whether those are technical questions. For labs, they will ask you technical questions like, what are some lab techniques that you know? Like, are you familiar with titrations, basic lab skills that we've all learned in labs, which is why I keep going back to, for me, labs were super, super important, because I was able to relate, even if I didn't know that even if I hadn't used that instrumentation specifically, I was able to have a background and tell them, okay, this is what I have, but this is what I would approach. Always having that willingness to learn, and even if you have shortcomings, you can be like, I'm flexible, I can learn anything. And I think that's also what's really important. You want them to see your potential of growth. I think that's something that you want to emphasize a lot. Preparation, again, I didn't have as much direction as Justin did with knowing where I wanted to go. But I did have some internships here and there, which gave me experience to draw from, which is also super important. But even if you don't have, you're thinking, I don't have an internship, or I don't know, like, I don't know how to get one, or it's too late for me, or you're like graduating, it's okay. Just again, like, what from your experience, from your 4 years of being at U of I, can you draw from? I think that's super, super important. And I think about now I'm just going in circles, but I think, and another thing that I wanted to mention is making yourself digestible. And what I mean by that is, you can be super wordy and super flowery with your choice of diction, but then you might be talking too much, right? Or you might not be saying anything at all. I think you should really like boil down yourself, as technical and cold that sounds. It's just kind of like figuring out who you are in order to better market yourself. So making yourself digestible, like, what experiences do you have? What did you do? What classes did you take? What jobs have you held previously? Making those be known, but also having a very compact and concrete way of presenting those things. So what that may look like, we could talk about resumes, right? What that looks like for me anyway, for my resume, is that I have a lot of verbs, and I say, this is what I did, and I did this to support this. But it's very short and very compact. So making yourself digestible and understood, because the interviewer might not have the same experience as you do. Like, they might not know terms that you might know. So you want to make sure that you're coming across, you want to make sure that you're putting whatever information that you're putting out there is easy to understand. Like, you're talking to a first grader, not to undermine the interviewer's experience or, capability to understand something. It's just that you don't want to talk a lot of jargon. Like, you don't want to say academic jargon to someone that is not from that field. You know what I mean? So I think that's another good thing to keep in mind when you're interviewing or when you're writing your resume.
Thank you. That was really helpful from both of you. And I'm glad that Justin actually brought up research, because I'm in research right now, and sometimes I'm not sure if that's like helpful for me, because I want to end up in industry. But like I'm glad that it helped you because hopefully it'll help me too.
Yeah, it definitely
So
will.
thanks.
Yeah, and I'm glad you all mentioned over and over again, right, the emphasis and importance of your communication skills, not just in writing, but also during the interviews, being able to sell yourself and sell your skills in a coherent fashion. That's great advice. Awesome. Next question I have for you from another student was, being in the field, what is something that was surprising for you to learn about when you joined each of your role?
Something surprising, I guess, really it's the variety of jobs that you can hold given whatever field you're in. So for pharma, what I always thought of in school is, okay, you have the people who are overseeing your reactors and are on their front lines, kind of making the product. And that's usually what I would always think of when I thought of, oh, I'm going to work for a pharma company. I'm going to be the person who kind of oversees that process as a chemical engineer. And that's pretty much what most people there do. What I didn't realize is that's only very one small piece of the pie that really goes into being in this sort of industry. So just for my internships, I've held different roles in supply chain and process control, being a process engineer, which is probably my most in-depth experience. Then I've jumped to doing validations. And then I've jumped into different sorts of quality roles. And right now I'm doing facilities work, which really just is not even like, it's probably removed from the actual product, but it still is one of those most important things. So it's really the depth and variety of jobs you can go into. Is because for most companies, you have your operations, you have the people that actually make the product, they have the people that sell the product, but then you have everything in between, from how you market it. So I know friends who have gone into marketing, or people who have gone through my program that have gone into marketing or sales, or they go into all those sorts of roles in quality or regulatory. So it's all those different jobs that you never really thought are out there that you are qualified for. Even if you aren't a finance major, you can still go into business and go to marketing if you want. Obviously, it might not be why you got a chemical engineering degree, but life, it takes you in all sorts of directions, and you could really get into whatever you kind of find your niche in is somewhere there's probably an opportunity to do that. So if you find that, okay, you go into a pharmaceutical company, you love the mission of being in the pharma company, but you really don't see yourself as being the frontline leader or being the process engineer for your whole career, it's not being stuck there. There are so many opportunities once you're even in the business. If you want to stay close to what the industry is and how you help people, you can do that in so many different roles that honestly I didn't have an idea of prior to when I joined. So that's what I think are probably the most shocking thing for me.
Yeah, again, beautiful answer. I think that's also what was shocking for me. I think, well, the most shocking experience that I had so far in my career was while I was working at Abbot. While I was working at Abbot, I was doing nutritional regulatory work. Basically, boil it down, I was working with labels, and labels are very specific. I did not know that at all. So when you go to the store and you see all of the ingredients and you see the nutritional table and what is in whatever it is that you're consuming, that's very heavily regulated by many health organizations or health agencies. So for us, the US, it's the FDA. But for LATAM, like Latin American countries, like Mexico was a different organization that dictated what could go in the label and what couldn't go in the label, what gets reported or what doesn't get reported, as well as a global, we have a global nutritional kind of like manuscript, I guess that would be the best way to put it, where it gives you, there are so many codes for labels specifically, and what you get, what the company gets to say and what the company doesn't get to say. So just to put it for just to put a perspective for you, most of those supplemental supplements that are out there in the market, like they're gonna be like lion's mane, which is a mushroom, right? And they can be like, oh, it helps with cognitive function, memory, makes you more alert, blah, blah, blah. They can put many sensational things, right? And they're allowed because the FDA doesn't really have a lot of regulations for supplements. So that's one thing I learned. When you're looking at supplements, you really have to do your research, because whatever's on the label, it's just more so for marketing rather than, or to make sales rather than informing the consumer about what they're consuming. And I think that was probably I'm doing very much bilingual work now, but I really liked being in the regulatory side of things, because you not only learn a lot about what something that you might discard as like, oh yeah, whatever, like box of cereal, like it has 110 calories per cup, but how did they get to that? And how was it made? And what ingredients are in it? And how does this affect like the daily nutritional value in the box? Just learning what each component of that means, and then how that is, and how that's different from country to country. Like if you go to Mexico, you see a completely different table. Actually, the calories are not even calculated the way that we do it. Or if you were looking at a product in the Dominican Republic, they don't allow you to put any pictures at all on the product, because again, that's against regulations, because that might be read as sensational, right? So I think it's a very interesting. I was very shocked. It made me think of things that I just take for granted, and it like, you start critically thinking about how you move yourself in the world, and how so many things affect you and your company, your job, and the rest of the world. And again, with pharmaceutical companies, because we have such a big outreach, a lot of the things that we do are very much relevant and very much parallel to whatever is happening in the world. So another thing was, we are currently going through a shortage in baby products, specifically like baby supplements, like when you have like powders. We have Justin, do you know any, because I'm blanking out on baby products, but baby nutritional products?
One of them would be Similac. So that was really the main one that you hear in the news. Yeah,
and so there was I think it was Sole that had the contamination, or maybe it was somewhere in Ohio.
It was the plant we have in Sturgis, Michigan, which is actually one of the highest output plants, but I could speak a little bit more about that real quick. So what that was is that they found contamination. So some babies got sick that had the formula itself. They did investigation and they discovered some at the plant. It wasn't matched to the babies that got infected or killed by what the bacteria infection was, but they did find it. So just an example is, if you have bacteria growing in the plant, even if it's not what was proven to be the cause, they shut the plant down, or in this case, we voluntarily did, but the FDA is now doing an investigation, and it's a whole bunch of regulatory work. So as is kind of what Andrea was saying, it's very highly regulated, and like a lot of scrutiny is on your process. And if you have one thing that's wrong with your plant out of thousands of square feet, that's what really kind of causes a giant supply chain crisis.
Yeah, which is what we saw in the market. If you go to Walgreens, you go anywhere, you might see signs where it says oh, only one Similac per person. And I actually worked in that product as well. So, which comes full circle because I am now in post-quality. I am now in the post-quality assurance department. And so whatever complaints we might have from patients, from Humira, Skyrizi, those are some of the products that I handle. Then we want to make sure that we're investigating those claims, because again, it might be a situation where there might be bacteria in the plant, and then we want to make sure that we're covering our bases more so for ensuring the patient safety, and then bettering our processes. So that was a long story. But yeah, that was my most shocking revelation that I had while working.
Yeah, awesome. When thinking about pharmaceutical companies, right? Someone may have the perception that, okay, it's working on the production or manufacturing of drugs or those types of things, but there's so much into it otherwise as well. The R&D that goes into it, the manufacturing, the scaling up of the process, quality assurance, regulatory affairs. So marketing, business, and sales, so many different types of role even within the industry. Kind of another question that it's a good segue to our next question. So being in the pharmaceutical field, do you know much about the FDA, and are those two interconnected? That's another question from one of our students.
Yeah, they are highly interconnected. It's very, as I kind of alluded to, everything you do is scrutinized and you have to have the proper documentation. So for one of my internships, I was doing software validation, which is basically going through spreadsheets that technicians use to calculate something with the process. And so I had to have a bunch of different people who were certified, verify that every single box in my Excel file did what it was supposed to do. Basically going through that and filling out documentation. So the one thing is that in the industry, no matter what job you have, you're going to have paperwork and you have to, I guess, follow proper protocol and document everything that you do. From my current role where I do a lot of facilities work, it's not as easy as just, okay, I need to upgrade a hot water system, or the HVAC is not working in this room. How do I change it? Sometimes with ceiling tiles that you have in your classrooms, these labs that we have, they're regulated just based upon what type of lab they are, based upon clean room standards. So if you pop a ceiling tile in one of them that's like a CNC1 room, basically they're caulk ceilings, so they're meant to be sealed. So if you unseal a sealed ceiling, you have to do a full cleaning procedure. You have to write documentation to the FDA. You have to basically have your long paper trails to basically justify why you did it, what steps were taken, and basically saying, is there any sort of impact on product? And then that's all documented, saved in a giant file somewhere. And then you have just being ready for the audits that are going to come from the FDA. I know from most pharma or all pharma companies, Abbott and AbbVie and the rest of them, is that we have our own sort of audit wings that are internal. So we check ourselves quite a bit, just based upon having our own corporate teams go through and kind of do simulation audits of what the FDA would do to make sure that we're prepared. Because one of the biggest things is that they're going to ask questions and they're going to want to see everything, because we want to be open and transparent to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row. Because what we do, if we mess that up, or if we get slacking, or if we get lazy, some people could get hurt, some people could even die, because that's the impact that we have. So it's a very high level of scrutiny, but it is justified because of the impact that we have on somebody's life. So it's a lot of those processes, is that everything you do, it's going to have a little extra bit of scrutiny to it, but it's just kind of the nature. So it really is probably as closely tied with the FDA as you can be, just based upon the really severe impact of what you do. it changes people's lives for the better, but you have to make sure that what you're doing is doing it the right way and making sure that everything you do is done in a way that's transparent. So that's, I would say, is the best that I can explain, just the really close nature between everything we do and the FDA.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was a very high level explanation of how related the FDA is with our procedures. It's not only isolated to the FDA, but other global health organizations that we have to abide by and definitely have to be aware of. Again, with AbbVie, we have a lot of factories in other countries. So there's one in Ireland, one in Puerto Rico, one in Sole, and they all have their differing regulatory agencies that they have to abide by. And so I have to be aware of it because I'm working with, I work with US complaints as well as out of US complaints. So everything that I do in my role is directly tied with the regulations that we have. One of them is just timeliness, what investigation, it's assessing the risk of certain complaints that we get, and making sure that all of that gets documented, properly investigated, and investigated within a 30-day period. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but that's what we strive for. And so I would say that for me, for my role, just heavily interwoven, and it dictates everything that I do on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thank you both for the responses. Students, again, what questions do you have?
Yeah, I have a quick question for the both of you. So obviously working in pharmacy, there's a lot of different values and skills that you learn, learning how to professionally speak with others and of course, trying to leave an impact on the world better than how you left it. I was wondering what's the most important skill or values that you guys have learned in working in a company like Abbott or AbbVie?
As far as values go, I would say is kind of what you mentioned of just trying to leave the world a better place. Is that whatever I can do, and whenever I have a hard day at work and I'm busy, I'm getting phone calls the entire day, I'm trying to fight fires that are happening. I just need to kind of remind myself that I have to keep myself to higher standard, of what I'm doing really makes a difference, and that kind of motivates me to keep going forward and to do the best that I can, because at the end, that's why I got into this, and that's why I continue to get up each morning and go to work, is because I know that what I'm doing has a real impact on somebody. As far as professionally, skills, I would say really it is communication, and it's kind of knowing how to get your point across to the right people. One of the biggest things is that I host a lot of meetings because I run a lot of different sorts of projects with different people. Some of them are in the high dollar amounts that require I have weekly updates with VPs. So how do you speak with vice presidents about a certain job? And if you have issues with that different project is very different than how I might speak to the different people actually on the ground, and how do you convey and disseminate that information? It's kind of about how you properly approach those conversations and knowing how to really, I guess, convey your point in the right mindset, and when to say something and when to not is really one of the best skills I think I've learned so far. It's just kind of always being aware of who your audience is. And then the other main point is how to really, I think, be convincing. So what I do sometimes is when I'm handed a new project from a client is that I basically somebody asks me, oh, can you do this upgrade? Then I have to go and then write a request for funding. So I am the one who actually fills out this paperwork, who says we need this amount of money. Then I have to justify my points in writing, then also in a presentation. So I have to then go before a board who's going to decide if I can get this money or not. It's how you really convey that in that high stress environment. Say, okay, this is what this project is. A lot of the stuff I'm not an expert on. It's electrical work. I'm upgrading Power distribution panels for substations. I don't know anything about that, but you have to learn that pretty fast or just be able to convey the information in a way that you can make your case. So I would say professionally, it's how you first off like host meetings or then how you convey yourself, but then also being able to really convey your points across to other people as well, especially when you need to ask for things such as money in the corporate world, which there's a lot of scrutiny over that as well.
Yeah, for me, what was your question again? I want to make sure that I answer it fully.
Yeah, of course. It was just basically like asking like what's the most important value or values or skills that you've learned working at your specific company?
Yeah, so to me, sometimes working at the lab, you kind of dehumanize the science behind it. I think science is very human, also very biased, but science is very human. And I try to bridge that humanity with everything that we do that's, again, very technical, very sciencey. I think bringing a face to whatever complaint or whatever work I'm doing is what, again, that's one of my values. I want to help people, and I want to, and so whatever that translates to, that's what I do. So again, AbbVie is a company that's primarily focused on bettering the life quality of individuals. And so it's nice knowing that doesn't matter what department you're in, you're still contributing to that overall like happiness or like lessening that suffering. So that and just finding your passion, right? I think I mentioned that before, but you want to come in and you want to be passionate about something, right? I think within AbbVie, you really get to foster that passion. You can go anywhere you want to go. And again, you're the limit. So you're deeply encouraged to continue learning and to continue growing. For example, I'm studying for the GRE. I'm going to go back to school and get my master's. That's something that AbbVie fully supports. So I think the two values that I've gotten from my work experience of both Abbot and AbbVie is that one, be passionate. It could be something very small, doesn't matter. You're still passionate about it. And because you're passionate about it, you're going to do everything in your power to see those goals being realized. And so that's really cool because you get to meet so many interesting and cool people that are also passionate about their niche work. And so it's again, you're like adding that social aspect to science, which I love, and which that's what's it's all about, right? Now shifting from that more of a pathos perspective to more of like an applicable like skills that I've learned from my experience at work would be communicating with cross-functional groups. I do a lot of coordinating, and a lot of that coordination, you know, people don't often agree with me. So it's really just knowing, like Justin said, how to communicate in a way that it makes sense to other people. Again, we come from so many different backgrounds, and it's hard to get everyone on board. So you have to be very flexible about what you do and adapt to new environments and situations. So I think one of the biggest skills that I've learned is being adaptable and being flexible. And that's something that everyone takes notice of. And I think that's a very important skill for you to have. Like if someone gives you a an assignment and you have no idea how to do it or how to approach it. It's asking questions. It's saying, okay, I don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna see, like, I'm gonna reach out to blah 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 person and going from there. Even though you didn't know how to do it in the first place, you had that initiative, and then at the end, you became more familiar with the procedure, which is something that has happened to me so many times. The first time it happened was actually when Paxlovid launched. So Pfizer provides one type of medication, and then we provide another type of medication. And so because it was a relatively new product, there were a lot of gray areas with regulations and investigations and what exactly we needed to do for that product and how we handle those complaints. So at that point, I wasn't really familiar with pharma products. I had only worked with combination products. And what that means is having a pharmaceutical component, like medication, and then having a device that injects that medication or puts that medication in your body. So I worked with Humira and Skyrizi and Lupron. And those are all combo devices. So again, like, I think the ability of being able to get pushed off the ship and then just making the best out of that situation and just figuring it out by yourself is a very important skill that I learned. And if you learn to cultivate that even before you start working anywhere, I think you'll find that it will take you very far, just being able to adapt and being flexible. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Great question. Great question. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Any other questions from our students before I move into the question in the chat?
I had a question. So if you could give your undergraduate self any professional advice, what would it be?
For me, it would be you have time and relax and take a breather. It would be that, and then it would be working on my communication skills. Again, I think you guys are all very smart people, and putting that smartness into words is definitely a skill that I was lacking. And so being able to practice that, just having a conversation in a professional setting, that would be like just practicing interviewing would be a skill that I would give myself. Also actively just looking for jobs. I didn't do that before. Again, I was severely underprepared when I was a senior in college. And even though I was not very well prepared, I still turned out okay. So I think that would be another thing that I would tell myself, like, it's going to be okay, right? Don't expect everything to go your way, right? It's the real world that you're stepping into. And so you're gonna find that it might be hard to get an interview, and that's fine. You will get an interview, right? It's what you do after you don't get something or you don't get the outcome that you wanted. It's what you do after that really counts. And I think that would be the biggest, that would be the one thing. If I only had to say one thing to myself, that would be the one thing. Don't give up, even though it might be disheartening. Again, I cannot stress enough how unprepared I was. You guys are already way ahead than I was being a senior. But the important thing, again, is to remember that you're okay, and it's going to take time, and you're going to learn these skills. So you don't need to feel like you need to push yourself to do something that maybe you're not comfortable with yet. It's all going to, you're going to get there slowly but surely. And that's all going to come from trial and error.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was very well spoken. It hits a lot of the points that I think I would say. Just really just building off of that, it's yeah, I spent a lot of time wondering, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right job? Am I going to get a full-time job? When's that going to happen? It's a lot of those thoughts that there's a lot of self-doubt, but I guarantee when you look back and you have your job and you're out of college and you're working, you're going to realize everything happened for a reason. So there's a lot less to be stressing about. Obviously, prepare, do everything you need to do to get yourself in the best position. But as far as laying awake at night wondering, is this the right path for me? Am I going to get a job? You're going to realize, I think, when you get there and you look back, I was doing okay. I was doing everything that I needed to do, and everything kind of happened for a reason. As far as anything skill wise that I could have done, I think is I probably would have jumped. I mean, as Andrew said, it's a lot of just getting in that sort of presentation mindset or talking with people. It's kind of more formalized conversation. So if that's doing presentations in class, I honestly, I did not like doing those. I was not somebody who would jump to even speak in class or read out loud or anything like that. I would probably be the last person that would volunteer if if a teacher asked, oh, do you want to present this? I would not have said yes. But looking back, I would be somebody now who I would take every opportunity I can to be able to start going through slides in front of people, because as much as you may not like it, doing slides in front of the class, that's what work is going to be. I mean, that is probably one of the best things that you can do, is that you're going to have a PowerPoint that you're going to make, and you need to convince somebody about what you're talking about. And you need to be able to go through that PowerPoint and not just read the bullet points and hope everything turns out okay. I mean, that's how you practice, and that's the whole point of doing it in school, is that when you get out, you're going to be very prepared. So if there's one thing that I say I would focus on, it's a lot of those presentation skills, and it's just taking every chance, even if it's not every chance, even if it's just the next time that you're kind of on the fence, just taking that jump and just deciding, yeah, you know what, I'm going to take this seriously, or I'm going to approach this in the mindset, because that is one thing that pretty much no matter what job you're going to be in, you're going to have to convey yourself in that manner.
Yeah, yeah. And again, Justin, you said something along the lines of looking back at your previous experience, it all adds to what you are now. So I wouldn't discount any experience that you're offered. I think those are all very important. And again, it builds character, it builds you as a person, as a professional person. And it all helps. I often find in my day-to-day work that I did something in the past and now it's coming back to haunt me, but haunting me in a good way, because it's helping me do my job now, you know? So again, don't think that you're going, like, it's good to have goals for yourself. That's great, but don't be disheartened if you're not there yet, because everything that you're doing is helping you get there some way, somehow. And maybe that looks different by the time you get there, and that's fine, because again, it's all going to help you figure out what you want to do, where you want to be, what you want to specialize in. And in a way, it's like you never really left school, not to be cheesy or anything, but you learn every single day. So giving yourself that, allowing yourself to learn from any experience and every experience is good. And don't beat yourself up if you're not wherever it is that you want to be at yet.
Thank you so much. Your guys' responses were great.
Yeah, that's a great
Of
question.
course.
Yeah, awesome. As much as I hate those group presentations and cross-curriculum design projects, right? That can still account for something later on. So Andrea, you mentioned going back to school about for a master's, but there was a question in the chat. Is a chemistry minor with a major in another STEM field enough to work at one of these one of your companies, or
Yes.
would you need a chemistry major and or a PhD?
No. So I would say, unless you really are very passionate about academics, a PhD just sort of limits your options work-wise. I think a lot of companies appreciate more experience rather than academics. You will see in some job postings whether you can substitute like master's versus experience. So like maybe a master's will be equivalent to like 2 to 3 years in the field. And that's because, again, even though my background in chemistry helped me secure the job that I have today, most of what I do on a daily basis doesn't have to do with chemistry at all. Like most of what I learned about what I have to do, I learned it in the job. So again, if you have a STEM major, you can apply that to anything, right? It again, you can go so many different ways. The limit is bound, like there's no limit. And again, it's just how you apply that unique experience, whatever your major is, to what the job description is. So short answer is no, you don't need that. As long as you have experience or a STEM major, you're gonna be fine.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's really, unless you're looking to be an R&D scientist in a very like specific field, and that is what you're looking to get into, and you want to specialize, I don't know, in polymers or something like that. If you really want to get into that specializedness, then a PhD or you're getting like the actual chem degree would be something that would be helpful. It's again, it's not 100% required if you have the proper experience in a related field, but that's probably the most it would be as like cookie cutter as you're looking for as far as a job posting. I would say everything else, it's really just applying the skills that you've learned in college, because it's 95% of what you're going to learn or do on your job is what you're actually learning on the job itself. Like a lot of what you learn in school, it's being taught how to learn and being like a lot of those foundational skills, but it's really broadly applicable to a lot of different sorts of fields. So I wouldn't say you would have to have like a PhD in chemistry if you wanted to do a certain job. It really just depends on if you have those sorts of base skills and motivation to kind of get into whatever you want to do. Because if you apply yourself enough, it doesn't matter really what degree you have, as long as you're qualified enough and can really bring yourself to do that job that you're currently in, to propel yourself into that next one that may be your dream job. It doesn't matter what your background is if you can perform. So we'll say like starting out or getting into it, it matters a little bit, but then once that, it's really how you perform your day-to-day activities. And you don't have to be a certain person on paper at that point. It really just is how well you can apply yourself.
Great. So yes, there's still jobs at the undergraduate level. Awesome. Another question that you touched upon briefly before, but can you talk a little bit about each of your day-to-day typical activities in your roles?
Yeah. So my typical day looks like I go in, I work hybrid. So I work from home like 3 days a week, and then on site for 2 days. So I log in. We use 2 systems to get complaints from patients. So I might get so we get records, and I have to review complaints. And so maybe I'll get like 30 complaints a day. And so for those 30 complaints, I have to review them, assign a risk level to the complaint, assign what the patient is complaining about. Sounds very simple, and it is kind of. But then I have to do like, okay, well, what parts of the process is this complaint touching on? Is this like a manufacturing problem? Is this a packaging problem? So from there, I have to determine, is this done? Like, did I do the full inspection investigation that I needed to do? If that's a yes, then I push it to close. If that's a no, then I look at what investigations it needs based on what the complaint is touching on. So that's one. And then I have projects that my supervisor assigns to me. So right now I'm working on another system that will log records as well. And it's really new. So we're testing it out. So I have projects. That's another part of my day. And then most of the day is communicating with other teams. And what I said before about coordinating investigations, that's where the communication comes in. Communicating with my team, making sure that everyone's on the same page about how we're approaching a complaint, communicating with not only my supervisor, but other managers in different departments, answering questions about what needs to happen in terms of investigations. Yeah, it really just boils down into records, coordinating investigations, and communication, plus other side projects that I have, which they all pertain to quality. Again, this is after it's the life cycle of a product that has been used. So I think maybe there's a conception about, all right, well, we're just producing a medication and it ends after the patient has bought the medication and that's it. No, there's so much more than that. And we like to, again, keep tabs on everything and how to better our process, as well as what risk we're constantly assessing risks. So yeah, so that's what my day-to-day looks like. I'm basically assessing risk and making sure that that risk gets properly identified and investigated.
Yeah, so for mine, I mentioned at the start that I'm part of the rotational program for Abbott. So at least for this year, I am a project manager in our facilities consulting group. So it basically means is I run construction projects. So my day, I don't know what it is until I come in the door. It can very much range. Some of it is I'll go in. I have projects at our different sites. So I'm currently based in our main headquarters where we have 50 something buildings. I think it's 56. And then we also have different sites in Lake Forest, Des Plaines. So it's a lot of different buildings. So I might start my day at a different building if I'm at a different project for one of my construction sites, but it's a lot of meetings. So what I do is basically I'm the person who coordinates projects. I have people who report to me as far as my project management teams. So I run weekly update meetings a lot of the time. So I think I'm managing right now, I'm the lead on 12 projects and I'm contributing to 6 others. So it's basically 18 projects total that I have to keep tabs on at a certain given time during the week. So it's bunch of they're in all different phases of construction, as far as ones that are currently under construction or in the planning phase or request phase or in the closeout phase. So it's really whenever something happens, they call me and then I have to kind of solve their problem. So a good example right now is that I'm dealing with, actually it's a fun project. We're doing a cafeteria in one of our buildings. So I think that's $1 million project, but it's a fully occupied building. So any sort of construction noise, there's going to be complaints. So today I was on the phone for back and forth for a couple hours, just based upon trying to figure out what was going on with some sort of drilling that was making noise above some people who was in a meeting, and it was a bunch of EPs there. So it was a whole big deal and they had to complain to somebody. So they called me. So it's really just being the first line of defense and then trying to figure out, okay, this is a problem. How are we going to get past it? So then calling our contractors, speaking with a lot of people who are like more your blue collar workers who are doing the actual trades. So it's speaking with them, figuring out what you're doing. How can we get past this to not make an impact? Is that changing hours? Is that changing the way we do something? It's a lot of these sorts of problem solvings that I may not know I may not be an expert on how they core through concrete to drill holes for electrical boxes, but I can ask the right questions as to how to make sure it's not an impact for everybody else. A lot of what I do also is just communication. So when we are going through construction, the last thing anybody wants, I mean, you deal with it for road constructions, is not being told something or your instructions aren't very clear. So what I do is I type up, okay, this is what's happening this week. This is what you can expect as far as noise, disruptions, all the other stuff. So I create diagrams showing this is what's happening in your building this week. You can expect noise this day, this day, this day. So it's a lot of that, a lot of coordinating actually what happens every day. So right now it's a lot of planning. Okay, for my cafeteria one, we're doing these trades are going to be on site for plumbing, electrical, mechanical, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you have to think about what's the impact of that. So it's in making sure they actually show up. And then a lot of what I do is also checking safety requirements, making sure they're wearing proper PPE, making sure that a lot of big thing is construction is that they're insured. So I have to make sure that the proper insurance is in place for the contractors, and then dealing with building maintenance, and it's a whole bunch of different things. So I guess long story short is I do a lot of different things, but not a lot every single day. So there are some days where it's quiet and I'll have no meetings and it's just the occasional emails that somebody needs something and it's an easy day. Some days I have meetings every half hour for the entire day. So I'm at 16 meetings and that's on top of answering emails, or I'm up till 8 o'clock trying to get stuff done for construction the next day. But it really just kind of gets into your peaks and lulls. As I mentioned, I have a lot of projects, but if like some of them are very low at one point and we're waiting for materials, it's one of my slower days. But if all of those are hitting on the same day when a lot's going on, it's obviously going to be very full and it's going to be a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings. It's very exciting. It's kind of like on a roller coaster that you kind of thrive off of the environment of when stuff's being thrown at you. It's very fast paced. And it's really, I would say, different than a lot of jobs. It's close to actually being, from my experience on the manufacturing setting, is that you kind of have your base job, but stuff's going to go wrong and it's fixing what's going on. And for a lot of people, I think that's exciting as to how to think fast and think about how you get through problems. So I guess in big sum, my day-to-day, it's very different. It's exciting, but a lot of what I do is sort of coordinate to make sure everything's happening in the right way with cash flow, and also what contractors are on site with safety, and then also just as far as communication to tenants and problem solving is probably the most that I do on the day-to-day setting.
Awesome. So we have 5 more minutes until the end of our panel. What remaining questions do we have from students, if anything?
I actually have another question, but this is like purely out of curiosity. I just want to know, like, after you guys both just described like what your day-to-day job looks like both of you have a lot of like problem solving skill sets, and like that's what you do, like assessing a problem, coordinating a plan, things like that. So I want to know, like, have you ever like coordinated a plan and it didn't really like help, or things didn't go well? And like, what did you do to recover from that? Like, was there a recovery? So yeah.
I can jump for that one. So yeah, I will say I am somebody who likes to plan everything I do. I am the person who knows what I'm gonna wear the whole week at the start of the week. I have that prepared. I know what meals I'm gonna eat for the next 2 weeks. I'm very planned and meticulous in that way. So one of the challenges for me is that construction, anything happens and you don't know until stuff goes wrong. So I can have the best plan that I think is foolproof, and everything does not go what it's supposed to do. A great example is I think it was last Thursday. I was doing a cooler renovation project, basically taking out evaporator condensers because it wasn't working, basically replacing the equipment to make the cooler be your giant refrigerator that you're going to store stuff in. Long story short is we had contractors on site that were doing brazing, which is like welding for copper, and they didn't turn off the sprinkler. So they got too close to the sprinkler, the head popped off, and flooded the entire lab, the whole floor of this R&D building, set off the fire alarm. So I evacuated a 5-story building with for pretty much all of our Abbott R&D for diagnostics based upon that project. So it's getting that fun phone call saying, hey, this is what's going on. And then you have to really think, oh shoot, what am I going to do now? So it's really then trying to recover from that, because obviously we didn't plan on doing that. Our plan was it was going to go perfectly, it was going to go smoothly. But then it's getting the proper people notified first, because a good lesson is that don't ever let your boss hear something that is with your project that doesn't come from you. Because the worst thing, I would say this is applicable to most jobs and industries, is that the last thing you want is your boss to hear something that happened with your job from somebody else or from their boss. So it's always making sure that communication is key. And then obviously making a presence on site. For me with that one is I have to kind of then coordinate the proper response crews. So I guess long story short is that stuff does happen, and you just have to roll with the punches and know that as long as you're making your effort and as long as you just take a few seconds, think, I'm not going to panic. What am I going to do to get past it? Because obviously when you get stuff flying at you and people are angry or upset and then they're panicking or whatnot, you have to be able to have that calm voice in your head to really think about what the next steps are. And then you kind of get yourself in that right mindset to get through it. So I would say it's, yeah, stuff's going to happen and you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel that this, oh, my plan didn't work. And you're going to start to think about what you did wrong. But the main thing is you recover first, and then you can kind of assess how we got there later on. So as far as immediate next steps, when something is, just try to get through that and don't think about guilt. Don't think about who messed up. It's more or less just get through it. And then you can always find that path through, and then the rest can be dealt with later.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. With my line of work, not a lot, we have guidance, but not a lot is set in stone. Well, there are a lot of things set in stone, but that's just more guidance to how you should be approaching certain records, certain complaints. But you, at the end of the day, you're the one that's coordinating all of the investigations that need to happen and making sure that all of that coordination is aligns with regulatory just regulations. So with that being said, we recently launched a product, Skyrici, that's been around in the market for a long time, but we recently launched a on-body injector. So what that looks like basically is, instead of having a syringe or an automated syringe, we have this device that can just go in your body, and then you click it, and then it dispenses the medication into your body. And so because it's a new product, there is a lot that we don't know how to approach. And one of those instances, again, investigations are very important. Making sure that all of the proper investigations are launched in a timely manner, super important. And there's this one investigation that's if something is verified, if the complaint is verified, and if it's a high-risk complaint, then we have to, per FDA, we have to launch an assessment of this verification, and we have to assess what this risk means once the patient has experienced this, and what it means in terms, like what it means globally and what it means in terms of the process. So because it's a new product, and because a lot of the codes that we have for that product are high impact, we had a bunch of samples come back to us, and they were all verified. And so we did not launch that very important investigation because we were told by management to not launch it. However, you will once you're in the workforce, you will become very familiar with terminology such as SOPs or QPPs. That's documentation that guides, that tells you how to do your job, or like that's like the fundamentals or the structure. So I pointed out that we needed to launch those, right? Or we needed to launch the investigations, and then it had to go through a whole process of like management. It reached to the director of the site, and they were like, why is this not getting done? And so I was the one that kind of like noticed that we were not doing what we were supposed to do. And then I was the one that kind of had to deal with the fallout and how we would approach launching all of the investigations that we missed and still be in accordance with regulations. So again, like Justin said, you can blame a lot of people, but that's not going to really get you anywhere. You can panic, and that's also not going to get you anywhere, because at the end of the day, you still have to deal with the situation. So what I did after identifying that, I guess, failure was, again, coordinate with our team, with management, how we were going to approach launching all of these investigations, and making sure that we were still within that time limit that the FDA puts on us. So it sounds really simple, like that solution, but it was actually chaos that day. Lots of nervousness. But again, I think what I've mentioned before about being flexible and being able to adapt to whatever the day throws at you, super important. Again, like Justin said, rolling with the punches. That's the best thing that you can do. And having that independence of like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and guiding the team, being a leader, is just as important as being a good team player. So a lot of cooperation, a lot of coordination needs to happen on a daily basis, and just being able to function with several other departments, super important. And that's what got us through, that cooperation, that communication, and that willingness to, all right, this happened, but what are we going to do? What are the next steps that we're going to take? And so I was able to think of my feet, and we were able to come up with a plan. And then, you know, we salvaged everything. Everything was okay. So, yeah.
So great. Well, thank you both for those amazing responses and all your insights. I'm sure I learned a lot from you all, and I'm sure our students did too. If anything, I certainly took away that besides your technical skills, your soft skills, your communication, ability to work with people, being flexible, adaptable, all of those skills are equally, if not even more important than your technical skills in whatever role you would go into. So yeah, thank you again so much, both Justin and Andrea, for your time. And thank you all students for attending and for such amazing, engaging questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And again, thank you so much for your questions and willingness to learn. It's really cool to see you here, and hopefully I'll see you soon, wherever it is that you go exploring.
Yep, thanks everybody. If there's more questions, you can always add us on LinkedIn. I'm sure we would both be happy to answer any follow-up questions that you guys may have.
Yeah, for sure.
Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. One other last thing I wanted to point out is that, as I mentioned before, the session is recorded, so all the participants will be receiving the recording through your email, and it will also be posted on our SCS Careers YouTube channel, as well as our Media Space channel. So thanks again all for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.